Hallelujah. Good evening, good morning, good night, good afternoon, buen nuit, wherever you are, whoever you are. Thank you for joining us today on this auspicious occasion. um, uh, what's the auspicious occasion, you might say? Today is Passover. For some who believe that Passover is 7 day. Passover is the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. For those who believe in the 7 day feast, and then there are those who believe in an 8 day feast. Passover being a day or a time of its own, and then we begin the 7 days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. All right, that's not what we are. We're not going to discuss that today in terms of arguing who is right and who is wrong. We don't argue, we don't debate that, who's right and who's wrong. What we look at is what the narrative says, and you make your choice. I'm not mad at you for whatever choice you make. And I hope you are not mad at me for whatever choice I make. And hopefully we make the same choice. Hopefully we see the same thing. That hopefully we could walk better together. We could join, we could come on this journey, we could stay on this journey, if you will, together in a better harmony when we agree. Okay? So we are in this topic, however, is Satan the arch enemy? We are dealing with this topic. Who is Satan? We are dealing with this topic, the arch enemy of our souls, right? And that's various ways of depicting this devil, this adversary, as he's so widely known as today. And I want to veer off a little bit. We're dealing with the same adversary, we're dealing with the same topic. Who is Satan? Or is Satan the arch enemy? Is he the real adversary? Right? Today we want to look at, in that aspect, in that context, in that lane, we want to look at this simple 4-letter word called evil. A 4-letter word spelled E-V-I-L. Evil. And how we see evil, what we call evil, and what is determined to be evil, right? And as I was preparing for today's teaching, I thought about the auspices of today, right? Which is Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread. We're going into the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and so on. Where we're supposed to get rid of all leaven in our homes, all flour products or products with leaven in it. Clean our homes and so on. Clean ourselves of that, of eating those things, putting those things in our body. And I thought of that word because in today's context, you could look at the word leaven as a form, as a way of depicting evil, right? We know in the letters, it is said a little, or in the Gospels, it is said that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. A little bit of yeast, a little bit of leaven caused the whole lump to rise. It affects the whole lump. Growing up, the old folks used to say, one bad apple spoiled the whole bunch. Michael Jackson wrote a song about that. One bad apple to spoil the whole. I think he said, don't spoil the whole bunch. I ain't know the lyrics of the song so tough. But he talked about the one bad apple, either not spoiling or spoiling the whole bunch. You get my drift. See, come on, let's stay focused. We're not arguing about. We're talking about the idea that a little bit of bad spoil the whole basket. Okay? So, with that in mind, with Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread at hand, we want to look at evil. We want to look at, is Satan, is this Satan, is that entity the arch enemy? Who is the arch enemy? Can we identify who it is or what it is? Right? And so we want to look at evil. As I've said before, in many of the teachings on this channel, and I think included even in the last session we did, we talked about perception. We are constantly going to talk about perception. And the perception we ascribe to is the perception from above. The perception of God. What is God looking at when he looks at something? What does he see? We know, those of us who have read our Bibles, gone to churches, synagogues, where have you, we know what the narratives has declared. God looks at the heart. Jehovah sees the heart. And that is what he gleaned. That is what he attracts him. That's what he holds on to. That's what moves him. The heart of the issue at hand. Right? The narrative also declares that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So it depicts how important your heart is and the motives. What are you focused on? What are you continually, what is your perception on things, on life, on things pertaining to life? And it's the same thing we do here. Our intent, our goal, our drive, our fortitude, our oomph, everything that we have within us, we strive to look at things from above. Paul says, if there is any virtue, if there is anything to talk about, think on these things. Those things that are above. And so many of us are wrapped up, tied up, and tangled up in the things that's beneath. In the earthly things, in the human things that we forbear, we forego that perception, the God perception. And as a result, even though we strive to be good and strive to do good, we might be on the other side of the fence. If you're not for God, you're against him. If you are not for him, you're against him. So there's no in between. You can't stand on the fence and say, I'm for both of you. I'm for God, I'm for the other side. You can't do that. You have to choose. Choose you this day whom you will serve. Whether you would serve God or whether you would serve man. And in some cases, mammon. You have to choose. We have to choose. It's a choice that we must make. And God has given us ample tools. And as James says, if we lack tools, if we lack wisdom, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God. Who will give liberally. God, he's not going to hold back. If you want wisdom, if you want discernment, if you want to be armed with the ability to make a choice, ask God. And he will gladly give it without hesitation. And so this idea of evil, we have to come to terms with that, right? And we can't see what we have been doing and what we have done for so long is that we ourselves, humanity as a whole, have derived, have come up with our own ideals and ideas and philosophies and beliefs and faiths in what evil is. And today, let's look at what evil is. Keeping in mind that today is Passover, or we are in that season or in that time, in that set feast of Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread. And let's deal with that, and we're going to show by the scripture and by our own philosophies and ideologies how we may be on the wrong side of the fence, thinking that we are on the right side of the fence. We may be against God, thinking that we are for God. Amen? Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it. Today we're going to start, not in the Passover passage, we're going to get there. Today we're going to start in Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2, verse 9 is the first place in the scripture where that word evil, I think, from my search, is brought forth, right? And I'll read Genesis chapter 2, verse 9 for us. And we'll go into the teaching from there. Genesis chapter 2, verse 9 says these words. And out of the ground, I want to read firstly from the Hebrew Names Version. Out of the ground, Jehovah Elohim made every tree to grow. I want you to listen. Out of the ground, Jehovah Elohim made every tree to grow that is pleasant to the eyes, or pleasant to the sight, or pleasant to the perception. With that word sight, it depicts all of these things and even more. Pleasant to knowledge, information. If we look at the word sight and see, and we see all these threads going through all these words, and all these words come with all these meanings. Okay? Words have meanings. So God, Jehovah, the God we're talking about today, the one we say we believe in, he created out of the ground every tree to grow that is pleasant to the sight, and also that is good for food. And these trees include these two trees that we're going to talk about. The first one is the tree of life, which is in the middle of the garden. And the second one is the tree of the knowledge. Listen, because the word sight, that is pleasant to the sight, is contained in the word knowledge. I just said that when I talked about sight. So he says, the second tree that he made that was pleasant to the sight and good for food was one, included the tree of life, which was in the middle of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. didn't specifically say that tree was in the middle of the garden, but if you want to say it was in the middle of the garden, it's all well and fine. I have no problem. But I want us to focus in on this verse, Genesis 2 verse 9, where it is said that God says that God has created out of the ground and made every tree that to grow. He made these trees to grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, including the tree of knowledge and the tree of the knowledge, including the tree of life in the middle and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God made all these trees that is beautiful to look at and to eat from, including the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Out of this verse, which I have ascertained and said in previous teachings, there is no admonition here that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is not good to eat. Neither is it bad to look at. Because encapsulated in this verse is the idea that God created all these beautiful trees that is good to the sight including everything that has to do with sight. You know, when you go to the market and you're buying fruit or food, the markets are specially set up for you and for me when we walk in there. I used to work at a particular retail outlet, big retail outlet store, and they do the same thing. They didn't used to sell food there, they used to sell clothes. But the principle was the same. It was always, everything was set up to attract your attention. Because that attraction to your attention would hopefully give you ideas and hopefully cause you to put your hand in your pocket, take out your money and spend it. See? So the idea here, encapsulated in this verse, God made every tree that was pleasant to the sight. We talked about that, not at length, but we talked about that. So you know what that means. You could go look up the word sight, see, perceive, knowledge, all that. You'll see. You'll see all the threads. And good for food, including the tree of life, good for food, and the knowledge, and good for sight, and the knowledge of the tree, the tree, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, good for food, and good for sight. Say what you want, spin it however you want. If you don't believe that's what it said, then hey, I'm just saying, encapsulated in that verse, that's what I'm reading. I'm seeing it. That's what he says. So the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So when we look at, if we flip forward, we're not going flipping forward now, because I want us to look at the word evil. But if we flip forward into Genesis 3 and into this the scenario that took place there, and all the things we have been told, right? It would seem as though that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was we were told not to eat from that tree because of what the tree was named. Because the tree was called the knowledge of good and evil, it would seem as though, from everything we have been taught, it would seem as though that tree, God made that tree, and that tree was you wasn't supposed to eat from because it was bad to eat from. The fruit was bad. But I want to challenge us today. I want you to hear me carefully and don't misinterpret what I'm trying to say. I want you to hear me carefully. That's not what this verse said. According to this verse, it depicts the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil as trees that were pleasant to the sight and good for food. Now, let's look at the word evil. First, before we go gallivanting, hold your horses, sit on your horse and slow down. Pull the reins back. Whoa. Get him from galloping into that nice slow trot, maybe a little walk. It's okay. Let's see what my friends, Browns, drivers, and Briggs call that word, depict that word to mean. The word evil, according to the Brown, Driver, Briggs definition, says bad, evil as an adjective, disagreeable, malignant, unpleasant, unhappy or unhappiness, painful, gaining pain, misery, have everything to do with displeasing, bad, of its, bad land, bad water, bad value, worse than, right? Sad, unhappy, hurtful, unkind, vicious, wicked thoughts, actions, deeds, distress, injury or injurious, calamity or calamitous, if I say that word properly, adversity, wrong, unethical, distressful, right? Has all of these meanings. Strong's go on to say bad, morally and naturally. Includes adversity, affliction, calamity, displeased, displeasure, distress, unfavoredness. All the things that we normally assume with being bad. But the strange thing is, God created this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God is the one who created a tree. So, I thought Satan was the enemy. Okay? That's what we've been pounded. That's what I've been pounding in our head for generations. That devil, the adversary, that Satan, that wicked man, the man of lawlessness, all kinds of stuff we call it. Which, hold your horses. We're not saying that that's not true. That there isn't an individual that's going to be identified with those characters, that personality. Hold your horses. We're not going there yet. I just want you to understand that reading the verse, Genesis 2:9, God is the one who created this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It was Jehovah himself. Did he know what he was doing? Doesn't he know what he's doing? Of course, he is the creator. That word, the Hebrew word is ra'ah. Ra'ah. Right? Ra. It is spelled R-A, and you have the marks A-H. It is phonetically spelled R-A-H. Right? And that word has a root word spelled R-A with the Hebrew marks A, Ra'ah, Ra'eh, Ra'ah. However, I don't have that Hebraic twang, that dialect. Some words, this one no. And it's phonetically spelled R-A-W, like raw, raw, raw. And it kind of has the same meaning: bad, evil, displeasing, all these things. Right? When you go down to Strong's, Strong says, good for nothing, that is bad, physically, socially, morally, associate selves and show selves friendly are by mistake for the Hebrew number 7462, which is a word that's related to this word. I want you to go take a look. Let's take a look at that word. According to Strong saying that it is that this word is mistakenly sometimes applied to this other word. But if you look at this, if you look at the word, it's the same foundation. Okay? This word, however, that Strong said don't associate with that, says it's Ra'ah, R-A, or R-A-W-A-H, as in the transliteration, or the phonetic spelling according to Brown's Driver Briggs is raw, same R-A-W, and in this instance is A-W and not A-H in terms of the phonetic sound, in terms of how it sounds. It's like raw, right? A-W being all. Whereas in spelling it, when you transliterate the word, it's Ra'ah. Okay? And it's a little technical to understand, but I want you to see that phonetically is not really a huge difference in the pronunciation. It's not a huge difference in the spelling. Okay? Because these three words have the same letters or the same root, if you will. But this word speaks to pasture, like a horse pasture or a cow pasture, P-A-S-T-U-R-E, right? It speaks to tend, or to tend after the animals, or to take care of, like with food and shelter and so on, to tend animals, to take care of, like a pastor does, take care of his flock, his sheep in the church, kind of thing. This word has that connotation. So, what am I saying? I'm saying to you that we have to be careful when we read things and when we interpret things. Am I saying the word used in the knowledge of good and evil is incorrect? No. Am I saying that that word has some form of goodness to it? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just telling you what Brown's Driver Briggs say, what the parts of the word, just like we have discussed many times, the word obedience and the word disobedience, they have the same words, the same letters wrapped up and tied up in there. Disobedience is something completely opposite to obedience. Opposite is the same thing, right? Opposite contains the word oppose. Does that mean that opposite means to oppose? Doesn't necessarily mean that. What I'm saying is we have to put things in a context, okay? You can use words. If your words are out of context, that word, anybody listening to you could take what you say and and just destroy it because it's not in the proper context. And people do that all the time. Don't even talk about news and the television, the people on the news. Them news stations do it all the time because they listen to somebody saying, like you listening to me saying something, and I'm sure you might hear me say something and just go off on a tangent. I promise you, what James say? Be slow to speak and be quick to listen. If we practice that, if we listen more than we speak, we would understand what is spoken in much better. I'm not saying we're going to be perfect at understanding it, but we will understand it much better. So, the idea that God said, the word of God says that out of the ground, I'm going to make every tree to grow that is pleasant to the sight. If we wrap everything we know about that word, and good for food, if we wrap everything we know about that word, good for food, because it's not one word, but it's like, what in the realm of spirituality or prophecy we know as a word. The three words with sometimes a whole paragraph is called a word. See what I'm saying? He created it. So, is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, is it a bad tree? Is it a tree that's not good? I beg to differ. Because God said everything he made is good. If we go back to Genesis 1, after every day, God looked at the creation and said, it's good, it's good, it's good. Right? And when he made man, he said, it is very good. So, based on that context, this tree of the knowledge of good and evil is not a bad tree. It's not a tree that was created not to eat from. Which brings us into the topic of, well, if it's not to eat, if it's not a bad tree and it's good to look at and it probably was good to eat, then what is the problem? Well, I'm glad you asked. The problem is our perception. When things are said, what do we hear? What do we perceive from what we hear? Now, if we read down from that verse to, let's go to verse 15. Let's go to verse 15. God took the man, Jehovah Elohim, the same one who just made the garden and the rivers and, the gold and talk about all that stuff, right? from between 9 and 14, that same Jehovah Elohim took the man now that he made between verse 1 and 7, took that man and put him in the garden, in the structure, in the place that he just made. In the place that he just made, which included every tree that was good for food and pleasant to the sight, including the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. And some would argue that he didn't specify that those two trees were good for food. Well, I will disagree with you. I would disagree with you, because we know that the tree of life is good for food. How we interpret that word food is very important. And we also know that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was also good for food based off of what was said before that. Now, yes, I know we've been taught a lot. And a lot of times we cannot slow our brain down. We cannot compartmentalize the things we have been taught for us to understand the segments better. But that's exactly what we are trying to do here. God took the man, verse 15, and put him in the Garden of Eden to do what? To cultivate and keep. Now, what does that mean? We all know what that means. We even alluded to the fact that the word to keep incorporates to serve, which is what we incorporate all over the place in a ministerial perspective with deacons and pastors and all kinds of assortments of. We serve. God wants us to serve, and we serve each other, and we keep each other, and we protect. So everything that those two words incorporate can be associated here. Here is where we get into the what is good and what evil is. Here is the line that was drawn for us to decide, for us to be in a place of decision, according to the Psalm, in the valley of decision, or the prophet. Verse 16. We are talking about, is Satan, is he the arch enemy? We saw who made the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We saw what evil means and all the little innuendos that's thrown in there with that Hebrew word ra and ra'ah. Okay? Here is the crux of the matter. Here is the crux of the matter that will be forever depicted, that will be forever hammered, that will be forever lifted up and raised up and exalted in this ministry. Here is the crux. Here is the food. Here is the meat. And Jehovah Elohim commanded the man, saying, listen, it's not a request. That word command is a strong word. This was not a request saying, okay, would you please do this and not, I'm asking you if you would, if you don't mind. This is not that. This is command. It's like instruction. It's like Torah. That's what Torah is. This is the instruction. This is the Torah of the garden, if you will. You may freely eat of every tree in the garden. That include, at this point, if we slow down, stop going into the teachings that you have been taught. If we slow down at this point, if we come to a four-way intersection and tip our brakes and stop for a brief moment just to look right and look left, make sure the intersection is clear. At this point, every tree in the garden is good to eat. At this point, at this four-way intersection. Now, after we stop and we get ready to go across to the other side, here's the kicker. But you shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, one might ask, why? Well, we don't know why. God never gave an explanation why. He never said, I made that as a test. He never said, I made it and I know it's bad, and because it's bad, I don't want you to eat from it. He never said that. He just never said why. And that is where we as human beings have an issue. We want to know why. We always have to have a reason. If for some reason in us, built in, is like, you tell me don't do that, I need to know why I shouldn't do it. And in most cases, because we don't know why, that pushes us to go do it, the same thing we are told not to do. I can't explain it. Don't want to explain it. What I'm saying is, God never gave a reason. But you shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Why he don't want you to eat of it, he never explained. He tells you now, however, there's a repercussion for disagreeing with me. There's a repercussion for not wanting or for not doing what I ask you to do. There is a repercussion and a consequence if you don't obey. What's the repercussion? What's the consequence? For in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. No questions asked, no back and forth conversation. He's not seeking your counsel. He's not asking you to do him a favor. He created you. He gave you everything that you could ever want. He just says, listen, everything is good to eat. No questions asked. And just as I tell you, everything is good to eat, no questions asked, I'm telling you, you can eat everything except that. No questions asked. The very same way. When we come to this idea of what is evil, that right there is a benchmark. And I will say this to you as a prophetic word. What God considers to be evil is not obeying his instruction. You cannot create your own instruction and present it to God and think that God should accept it or must accept it, because he doesn't have to. There are instances in the biblical narrative where people have presented things to God and God said, I like that idea. I like that. No, I don't like that. No, I like that. But that's for him to decide, not for you and me to decide. And what the issue is with humanity is we have taken things and made it whatever we want it to be and presented it to God and say, this is what we present. You have to accept this. That is the epitome of evil. So evil is not what you may think it is. Evil is what God calls evil. And if God says, do this, and you say, I don't have to do that, I can do something else, and that whatever else I do is going to equate to whatever he says, and that will put me on his side. That is evil. That is what evil is. Now, in the beginning of this session, I said we in Passover, right? And it's a feast, it's a celebration, it's a command, if you will. It's something that we are supposed to do as a perpetual thing. And running concurrently with what's happening as the Feast of Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is something that other people call Easter and Good Friday and Ash Wednesday and all those little things. And a ton of people claim to be on God's side and not partake in Passover celebrations and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, but partake in Ash Wednesday and Easter Sunday and Good Friday and Easter Monday and so on and so on and so on. A lot of people. And when it comes to this word that we are talking about today, about what evil is, looking at God's perspective, that on the other side, the Easter Sunday, Good Friday, Ash Wednesday thing, that God, in God's perspective, that's evil. He don't want anything. Listen, God ain't have no part in that. That's you, me, and humanity who created that. God ain't never create Easter. That being said, let's go to Exodus. What chapter? Let me find it. Hold a second. I have to find it. And the way I find it is searching that word. Go in there. Let me tell you what God said. And you might be resistant. You might try to resist what I'm saying, and it's fine. I'm not blaming you. I'm not trying to belittle you. I'm not trying to sweep you under the carpet. I'm not trying to denounce you in any way or shape or form. I'm just saying if you perceive what you're doing is right, I pray that it's right. I really sincerely pray that it is right and God is with you. But I want you to look at what you're doing, how you perceive what you're doing. I want you to make sure because we've been taught a lot of stuff. So, Exodus chapter 12 is the next place we are going to go. If you would excuse me, I'll take a sip. I'm thirsty. Excuse me. Are you there? Exodus 12. Let's read. Okay? Jehovah spoke to Moses and to Aaron. This was when they were in Egypt. They were getting ready to be delivered from Egypt. Okay? Jehovah spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be to you the beginning of months. So, that's something we have to pay attention to. This is God speaking. If God says that this month shall be the beginning of months to you, he's speaking to a certain people. He's speaking about a certain thing. He's speaking about the beginning of months. If we want to say that's the beginning of the year, that's fine. But the word says the beginning of months. So this month is the first month of all the other months. If all the other months together accumulate into 1 year, then it's fine. But this month, according to what we read, is the beginning of months. Okay? If we look at today's calendar, we see the beginning of months to be January. I'll leave that to you to go find out. Is this the month that Jehovah is talking about in this instant? I'm not going to go into that. We are dealing with evil, Satan. We are dealing with this idea that everybody thinks Satan is evil. He is the arch enemy. And again, I will say to you, maybe it's not him. So, here is what I'm saying. Based on what God says, this month is the beginning of months. We could go and read and figure out how we find out what the beginning of months are. And I'll just throw in this there with my good friend John's word, parenthetically. It's not January. It's not on the Roman calendar. It's not on the Greco-Roman calendar. It's not on the Gregorian calendar. That's not what's the beginning of the months talking about here. I'll just leave you with that. It shall be the first month of the year to you. He goes on to say, verse 3, speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th day of this month, they shall take every man a lamb according to their father's houses, a lamb for a household. And this simply means take a lamb on the 10th day of the month. So first you have to know what month we're talking about. Then you have to, on the 10th day of that month, you have to go into your farm, into your sheep pen, and you have to select a lamb. I would suggest that in this time, they were looking at lambs even before the 10th day. They will, okay, that one looked like it's going to be good. Maybe they take out a few prior to the 10th day, so that on the 10th day, when they re-examine them, they'll take out the cream of the crop. That's just my logic, right? Looking at it from a logical perspective, from an honest, godly perspective. That might be the quickest way to do it. He says, according to their father's house, is a lamb for a household. And he's talking about size here, right? A lamb according to the size of your house. So if you have a big family and a lot of mouths to feed, you take a large lamb, a big size lamb. If you have a small family, you take a small lamb. And as we go on, we find out that if your family is small, it's just dad and mom and one child, you could join up with another family who has maybe the same size, and you all could get a lamb for the same idea. The perception is, don't cook a big old lamb and you only have 2 people to eat it, because you're wasting food. Oh boy, oh boy. I'm going to leave that right there. He explains it. If the lamb is too small, verse 4. All right, we're just going to go down a little bit. We're not going to go into the whole, all the little idea, the lamb without defect and 1 year old. We're not, no. I want to get down a little bit further. We're not going to talk about the blood. I want to go down a little further. We're not going to talk about, obviously, don't eat it raw. That's crazy. Who eats raw lamb? We're not going to talk about that. We're going to go down a little further. You shall not let none of it remain until morning. That which remains until morning, burn with fire. We could mention that. This is what we're going to talk about. We're going to read this one, and just for impact. This is how you shall eat it. With your belt on your waist, with your sandals on your feet, with your staff in your hand. You shall eat it in haste. So it's not a sit down and hang out all night kind of a deal. It's a quick fix. It's cook it, small amount, just enough for all y'all, and eat it quick, because we getting ready to move. Listen, okay? Listen, don't rush. See, we going into this whole New Testament. No. Stay here. Let us learn to block off out things to understand what is being said here. Let's go down some more. Let's go verse 13. The blood shall be to you for a token. You know what a token is? It's a way of getting into some place. It's like a ticket, right? You go into the movies, you buy a ticket. They go to the kiosk or to online or to somebody, and you pay them money, and they give you a ticket. And you hold on to that ticket until you're ready to go to the movies. If you do it online and so on and so on. And then you go by the person who takes your ticket. They look at your movie you bought, and they say, this will give you entrance in the theater 4 where the movie is showing there. It gives you, on the ticket, it tells you the seat you're sitting. So when you go into the movie and it says J5, you can't go and sit in J6. Because if you go and sit in J6, somebody might come after you and say, hey, you in my seat. Get up. And if that person gets nasty, you can't be mad. Don't get mad. Look at your ticket. It says J4. Sit your behind in J4. So if the person come, whether they nasty or not, and they say, you in my seat, just move. I'm sorry. Like the scripture say, make up with your enemy real fast. See, we don't think like that. We think we right, everything we do, we right. I tell you. That's what a token is. It's like a ticket. Listen, this blood shall be to you for a token on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Now, talking about good and evil, talking about what evil is and all that kind of stuff. Remember, God is talking to a certain people, right? Who say they believe him, who say they want him to be their God. If somebody who he's not talking to hear what this conversation is and say, you know what? Can I hang out by you guys tonight because this sounds scary. I don't want to die. If that person decide to come into your house and you put blood on the doorpost and stuff, God is not coming into the destroyer is not coming into that house to destroy that person, even though God didn't necessarily speak to that person. Oh boy, am I getting into trouble today? Because he said, when I see the blood, everybody in the house is safe. I ain't coming in there because the blood on the outside. I'm telling you, you better listen to what the Spirit of God is saying. Be careful of who or what you call evil. Now, many of us have been taught that Yeshua came, he died on the cross, he shed his blood, and because he did that, we don't have to be obedient no more. We just have to, well, they mightn't say we don't have to be obedient. They'll say we don't have to do these things no more because they are null and void. Well, who made them null and void? Did Yeshua make them null and void? That's not what his testimony says. And I don't care if Paul said that. If he literally says that, Paul is incorrect. He's wrong. And he should not have said it. I ain't scared of Paul. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Let me use that phrase. It doesn't matter. If Paul said that, he wrong. According to the old folks, he did wrong. Based off of what is being read here. Let's read it. Verse 14. This day. What day are you talking about? Passover. What day is God talking about? Passover. This day shall be a memorial to you. Who is you? Whoever is listening. If you obey me and put the blood on the doorpost, you have to obey this. Guess what? If you don't obey this, you won't fall by the wayside somewhere along the road. He might pass over your house that time. You come out the house the next day and go about your business doing whatever you choose to do. Guess what? He's going to catch up with you. You have to be consistently obedient. Verse 14, we still there? This day shall be to you for a memorial. Oh my goodness. What is a memorial? 9/11, Memorial Day, Labor Day, Even Easter Sunday, people make it a memorial. Good Friday, it's a memorial. What else? Christmas Day, people make that a memorial. What else? How many holidays we have? Every holiday that we created as holidays, or we call holidays, nobody is taking them away. They live in the memory, generation after generation. Everybody know July 4th is Independence Day. So it's a memorial. Everybody know 9/11 since the time 9/11, since the events of 9/11 2001. It's been a memorial since then, a Memorial Day. Here, God is saying, Passover, this day, is a memorial for you. You shall keep it. Not just for you. Let's read. You shall keep it as a feast throughout not just your generation, but your generations. By an ordinance, or by a statute, or by a law, or by a Torah, or by an instruction. How long? Le'olam. Forever. Forever. I want you to go and listen to the teaching I did on what are we going to do with this word forever. What are we going to do with that word? When God says something is forever, what are we going to do? And when we talk about evil, we have to talk about the things we do and say, this is us. God, this is us. You have to accept it. But the things that he says that we should do, we refuse. We make up teachings about not having to do it. We make excuses about not wanting to do it. We decide we're not doing it. We're doing that instead. Which one you would think God would consider to be evil? We're looking at evil from God's perspective. My thoughts are not your thoughts, says Jehovah. Your ways are not my ways. So as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways than your ways. What are we going to do? God said that this Passover that we who believe are partaking in today and tomorrow and the next 7 or 8 days, God says it's a memorial. Remember, he is the one who brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Remember, look at where you are. Look at where you're sitting. Look at the nice car you're driving. Look at the fact that you're alive today. And say, God did this. And when I say look at the car you're driving and the house you're living in, I'm not talking about, you don't have to be a Mercedes-Benz or Rolls-Royce or some $1 million car. You don't have to be that. Don't have to be a $1 million job or a 10-bedroom house and on 16 acres of land. You don't have to be that. But are you thankful for what you have? Are you openly and longingly thankful? Are you ecstatic about where you are, about what God has done for you? Do you appreciate the fact that you could have been dead, but you're not dead, you're alive? And you might say, well, if I was dead, I'd be better off. Well, you don't know. if you would be better off. You have no idea. You hope you'll be better off. So when we talk about evil, when I talk about evil, these are the things that I focus on. When you focus on the person who walk in the movie theater and you sit down in J5 when your ticket says J4, and the person says to you, excuse me, but you're in my seat. You get pissed off because the person may not say it in a nice manner. They may not be cordial for whatever the reason. Does it matter? Does that matter? No. What's more important is how you respond. And you respond with your high and mighty self. Well, no, who are you? Why you talk to me like that? Listen, you're in the wrong seat. Humble yourself. Admit the fact, oh, I'm sorry. My bad. And move over. And hopefully you might make a friend. Hopefully the person might be like that for a moment. Something might just happen around the corner. You're the godly one. You say you love God and all this kind of stuff. And yet still you pissed off. You always mad at everybody. You think you know everything. And because you know everything, everybody wrong. And you have an attitude. See, this is the problem we have. This morning, I was listening to a podcast about a pastor in Colorado was presenting his case to the Colorado House of Representatives or something like that about abortion, and he's making a case for the Colorado House of Representatives to resist legalizing abortion. He's making a case, and his case was emphatic and undeniable. And it was amazing. I'm sitting there listening, I was like, wow. We have got to... What did Paul say about evil? I don't know if it's Paul, because I don't think anybody could affirmatively say that the writer of the book of Hebrews is Paul, right? As a matter of fact, let me go there and read what he says, right? And to find that, I may have to go to my word, evil, and see Hebrews. I don't know if that's it. Let me see. Hold on. I'm gonna get there. Hold on, man. Hold your horses. Come on. Gotta be there. It's gotta be there. He says, it's gotta be there. I know it's there. Exercise our discernment. He talks about exercising our senses. Paul says, to exercise our senses to discern good from evil. God, we have 5 senses: taste, touch, smell, hearing, seeing. 5 of them. And the writer of the book of Hebrews admonishes us to exercise these senses that will help us discern good from evil. I can't find it right now, and I don't want to spend more time looking for it. I know it's in Hebrews. Let me make one more try. I know. I want to make, maybe it's 8. Maybe it's 8. Let me see. One more try. I'll get more specific. Yeah. Exercise our senses. Hebrews 5. For everyone who lives on milk is not experienced in the word of righteousness. We don't want to talk about that right now. For he is a baby. But solid food is for those who are full grown, who by reason of use, listen, who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern good from evil. By reason of use, have their senses exercised. What in the world is he talking about, the writer here? We have 5 senses: taste, touch, smell, see, hear. 5 of them. Exercising them like running around and jumping and doing jumping jacks and bench press and leg lifts and stuff. That's exercising. How do you exercise your eyes and your ears and your nose and your mouth and your fingers? How do you exercise them? Think about that for a minute. And he said, who by reason of use, so this full-grown person, this mature person, they exercise these 5 senses in ways that they can discern good from evil. They observe, they listen, they smell, they taste, they touch. They exercise their senses to the point where they are able to discern good from evil. We are talking about evil. We are talking about what evil is. We are talking about Satan, the adversary, the enemy of our souls, the accuser of the brethren. Who is he? What is he? We saw in the garden, in conception, God created the tree of the knowledge of good and evil as a tree pleasant to the sight and good for food. The only thing stopping us, preventing us from eating from the tree, was his word. Do not eat from that tree. His Torah, his instruction, do not eat. And instead, we ate. And so it is even today. We establish things that we establish, and we present it to him and say, you better accept it. That's evil. That is evil. The highest form of evil. We refuse to do what he asks us to do. For whatever the reason, we completely refuse. But we choose to do what we want to do and expect him to accept it. That is evil. In the Passover, God says, this is perpetual. I want you to do this every first month of the year on a certain day at a certain time. This is what you do. Whether it sounds crazy to me and you or not. God is not interested in that. What God is watching is, will you do it? Will you do it? We refuse to make that a memorial, but we make Labor Day a memorial. We make Easter Sunday a memorial. We make Good Friday a memorial. We make Memorial Day a memorial. We make 9/11 a memorial. We make whatever day we choose a memorial for us. But his memorial, we kick to the curb. We ain't interested. We don't have to do that. And we talk about evil as if we know what it is. I submit to us, I submit to you and myself that we do not know. Or, not so much that we do not know, but because our perception is off, we are off killed. Or, as the scripture would say, off the target. See, the target is being obedient. That's the target that Yeshua hit every time. Obedient after 40 days in the wilderness. Obedient after, in every occasion. Obedient, 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 obedient. And Paul says in Philippians, he was so obedient. Even until the time he died, he was obedient. Continually, persistently, over and over again. He was obedient. He was obedient. He was obedient. What does he expect from you and me? It's to be obedient. It's to be, no, we don't want to be obedient. Well, why? Why had to do that? And we term it in all, we create these terms that if you think about it, is ludicrous in the least way. And it's evil in the worst way. Well, that's legalistic. You just want me to be legalistic. So, what you want to be? Lawless? You want to be legalless? Like the man of lawlessness? If the man of lawlessness is depicted as Satan, as the devil, as the Satan, why are you trying to be lawless like him? See, because legalistic means I'm on the legal side of things. I'm doing things according to the law. If I could speak plainly. Lawlessness or legallessness means I'm doing things against the law. I'm doing things illegally. And when you do things illegally, you're on the wrong side of the legal. It's on the opposite end of the spectrum. So if that's the simplistic meaning of those words, why are you associating yourself with something that is legalless or lawless? And so we make legalistic, we make that word evil. We, the believers, the people who say they believe, make the right thing the wrong thing, and make the wrong thing the right thing by saying, I don't want to be legalistic. Well, if you don't want to be legalistic, you are being legalless. And if you choose to be legalless, you become like the man of lawlessness, because that's who he is. He ain't operating under nobody's auspices. Whereas we are supposed to be operating under God's auspices, under his instructions. See, the brilliance about what Yeshua did has nothing to do with him being legalistic. He was legalistic. He was legalistic with grace and fortitude and humility and passion and desire and joy and love and peace and all those things that belong to the higher realm. The realm that he existed in, that he exists in. Love, joy, peace, perseverance, long-suffering, humility, self-control. Because when he could have brought in the legions, because that's what he told Pontius. And Pontius said, hey, don't you know who I be? I be Pontius Pilate, bro. I could set you free. Or I could execute you. I am in control. I'm in charge. I'm the king around here. Last week we talked about not taking the king for granted. Or we talk about having taken the king for granted. Because we don't really fully understand the concept of what a king is or who a king is. We don't fully understand that concept. We don't understand the full power and authority of a king. Pontius Pilate understood he understood him being the proconsul or whatever it is he was in Rome at the time. He understood what authority he had. Just like the centurion who told Yeshua, hey, you don't have to come to my house because I understand authority. I know how authority works because authority doesn't have to necessarily be there to get something done. Authority just has to say what authority needs done, and people who understand authority go ahead and do what authority says to do. See, but believers, we come up with our own ideals and our own ideas of what that authority is. And we call that authority, that's legalistic. I don't have to do that. Okay. If you don't have to obey, that's your choice. I'm just simply trying to say to you, I need you to rethink your choice. I need you to think about that really and truly. Because this memorial called Passover, according to what God said out of his own mouth, is a perpetual thing. It's forever. Le'olam. And if God say forever, what does he mean? Is God put a time on forever? Is forever like next 500 years? Is forever like next 1,000 years? Is forever like next 2 billion years? What time does forever end? What day does it end? When does forever end? So my friends, we could talk about this, the devil and Satan and all kinds of stuff. Okay? We could talk about that. Here's my question. Who is the real enemy? Hmm? Who is the real enemy? Who is? Who created the tree? Who created the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Hmm? Hmm? Who? Who is this God? Listen, we have to get it right. I'll say it again, because if we don't get it right, we wrong. Because you can't be wrong and be right at the same time. You can't serve God and serve Satan at the same time. You can't beat both of them at the same time. Just like you can't, what James said, out of the same mouth comes cursing and blessing. Really? Really? Yeshua said you can't serve God and serve Mammon at the same. You can't do it. If they say you can't do it, why do you think you can? Who are we? Who am I? Who are you to think you can do something that God say you cannot do? If God says it's impossible, and he is the one who says all things are possible with me, but if he says it's impossible, you can't come back and say, but God, all things are possible. Yeah, all things are possible, but if God said that is impossible, then it's impossible. what are we thinking? We have to get it right. This is about what you are going to do about what God said. And if you're not going to do what he says, that makes you evil. It puts you against him. If you obey him, it puts you with him. Ask Enoch. Ask Enoch. I use Enoch as a better example of over Abraham, because it still baffles my mind when you read that Enoch walked with God and then he was no more because God took him. What do you mean he was no more? What do you mean he walked with God and God? What? It blows your mind just to think about it. This relationship that he had with God was so awesome. It was so wonderful. It was so... God just took him. His wife woke up and she can't find him. His son's looking for him. They can't find him. The neighbors, if the neighborhood went on search, the police came, the sheriff department, the FBI, the CIA, the KGB, everybody went looking. They couldn't find Enoch because God took him. This relationship that Abraham had with God, that God said, hey, would I not tell Abraham, my friend? Imagine God calling people his friend. Just regular you and me. I'm getting ready to do some stuff over here in Sodom and Gomorrah. Will I not tell my friend Abraham? Or Abram, whatever you want to call him at that point. I can't remember exactly what he was. I think it was Abram. Abram still. Short version. Abram. That's the dynamic, the dynamism, the ebbs and flows, the complexity of that relationship was so awesome that we look past that. This is what God wants, people. This is what he desires. He wants that back and forth. He wants it. And the more you get in the flow of the river, is the more he's with you. Is the more look at Abraham. He walked into Abimelech. He said, listen, this is my sister. I think Genesis, 32, somewhere there. This is my sister. Because he was scared. And he told Sarai, hey, listen, if they ask any questions, tell them I'm your brother. Because I'm scared they're going to kill me because you beautiful girl. You awesome. Have you ever seen a woman that will make you think stuff like that? Have you ever met a woman that will blow your mind to that extent that you will come up with all these ideas of how not to lose her? You want to spend the rest of your life with her. You don't want to lose her. So he tells her, tell him I'm your brother, because he understands that people could be crazy. And we going into this place, I don't know who these people are, but I'm going to take precautionary measures. Tell him I'm your brother. Just in case somebody see you looking so sweet and beautiful as you are and want you. And we could look at that in all kinds of different ways, but that's not what I want you to look at. I want you to understand This relationship that Abraham had with God. That in spite of him conniving this situation with Sarah and Abimelech, in spite of Abimelech seeing when they walk into the city, the people saw Sarai, Abimelech's boys. They saw Sarah. They're like, oh, she's a fox. I'm going to tell my king, this woman coming to your kingdom. Oh my goodness, you got to have this woman. She is fine. She is beyond fine. She finer than Halle Berry and Jessica Chastain. She is the finest thing. I mean, she fine. And they bragged about her to the king. Again, they can't take king power for granted, bros, sisters. King could do what he wants. A king. We have to understand that little principle. That's kind of what he represents. The king said, bring her to me, or, And the king took her to himself. He took her and set her aside. Maybe he wanted to sanctify her, I guess. I don't know. He took her and set her aside. And while she was being set aside, he got a visit from he who created the man of God. From he who promised the man of God all these promises. King got a visit. And the visit went something like this. Listen, bro. That sister you have there, that ain't yours. You better give that back to who she belonged to, because you're going to have hell to pay, bro. You're going to have to answer to me. Paraphrasing. And then king wake up next day and call Abraham and be like, yo, what you do, bro? You set me up like that? You didn't tell me that. You told me that's your sister. Why didn't you tell me that's your wife? I almost got in trouble. To think about the dynamic relationship that God had with Abraham, and then Moses and Enoch and all these players, David even, Solomon, all these players. Don't it make you want to have that kind of relationship with him? I know I prayed that prayer a long time ago. I'm like, God, you talk to Moses face to face. What's up with me? Why you can't talk to me face to face? Come on. You call Abraham your friend. You can't call me a friend, bro. I can't talk to you. You can't talk to me like I'm your friend, bro. Come on, God. What's up? It's the beauty of the relationship. And even though Abram created this thing because of his own internal fears and his own internal anticipation of what the people may or may not do, God still protected him. God still kept him. God still ministered to him. I don't know about you, but man, that is some kind of relationship to have. That's the kind of relationship I want, bro. With God and with anybody I'm around. That's the kind of rapport, that's the kind of vibe I want to have flowing. I want to be on the right side of God. I want to be legalistic, if you want to call me that. That's okay. You be on the wrong side. And the worst thing is to think you're on the right side when you're on the wrong side. That happened to me. I came to the States and I'm driving, going here and there at the time with my girlfriend and stuff. And I went back home and jumped in my car and I made a turn. And back home, we drive on the left side of the road. And I'm driving, I make the turn and end up on the right side. And you tell me there's no God. I end up on the right side and driving. And in the distance, me and my neighbor was in the car with me. And I'm driving and I see a bus in the distance coming on the same side. And I look at my neighbor and say, what a bus doing on the wrong side of the road? I look at my neighbor and say, what a bus doing on the wrong side of the road? And we talking and laughing because the bus on the wrong side of the road. And we getting closer and closer, the bus getting closer and closer. All of a sudden, we realize, wait a minute, you on the wrong side of the road. You on the wrong side of the road, bruh. And in a split second, I had to swerve off the road, go into the bushes that I have no idea. Listen, I don't know what's in the bushes. I don't know if the bushes are big rocks, small rocks, old cars. I don't know what was in the bushes. But I swerve off the road, go into the bushes and drive in the bushes and come back on the road behind the bus and had to go get my butt back on the right side of the road, which is the left side. I don't know if you heard that. I was on the right side, thinking I'm on the right side, being on the wrong side. And I had to go in the bushes, come back, go around the bus, and get myself on the right side of the road, which was the left side. Did you hear that I said I didn't know what was in the bushes? The bushes was up high over the car. It wasn't trees. It was like shrubs and grass and stuff. But the grass was as tall as the car was tall. I couldn't see what was in the grass. I didn't go in the grass and stop, because I might have get stuck in there. So I went around the bus, because I was on the wrong side, which was the right side. Because we drive on the left side. And I hope somebody heard that and understood exactly what that means. We think you're on the right side because you don't want to be legalistic. You want to be legaless. Well, legaless is the wrong side. That's the wrong side to be on. You don't want to be lawless because you're closer to the man of lawlessness. Because that's all he wants. He wants to be lawless. Our desire should be to be lawful, full of the law, full of Torah, full of instruction, full of obedience. That's what we should strive to be. But instead, we have been told for centuries that we have to be lawless. We have to be legalless, less legal. Friends, I just hope that as you listen to this message, I pray that today would be your first Passover. I pray that you would go in your house and you would throw out all the bread and crackers and stuff with leaven in it. You know, it's your first time, so it's okay. You mightn't get all. But I pray that you go back and read Exodus 12 and read Leviticus, what it says there about the same day, the same feast, the same time. Because it's not just a day. I pray that you move away from doing what God says not to do, or moving towards what God says to do, and moving away from what man says you should do instead of obeying what God says to do. Go listen to the message. What are we going to do with forever? There are things in there God says it's going to be forever. But we've been taught they're done away with. In closing, I want to read this last verse and then we'll go to Numbers 6. Turn in your Bibles to Micah 6. And we're going to start from verse 1. Micah 6 verse 1 says, "Listen now to what Jehovah says. Arise, plead your case before the mountains, and let the hills hear what you have to say. Hear, you mountains, the Lord's indictment, and you enduring foundations of the earth. For Jehovah has a case against his people. He will contend with Israel." If you want to know who Israel is, go re-listen to my teaching on who is Israel. Because the Jews think they alone is Israel. And you have to be a Jew and all that kind of stuff. Go and listen to my teaching on who is Israel. My people, what have I done to you is the question God is asking. Israel are his people, yes. Who are those people? And then he questions his people, what have I done to you? How have I burdened you? Answer me. For I brought you up out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you out of the house of bondage. I sent before you Moses and Aaron and Miriam. My people, remember now what Balak, king of Moab, devised, and what Balaam or Balaam, the son of Beor, answered him from Shittim into Gilgal, that you may know the righteous acts of Jehovah. Go read that. It's over there. It's in Numbers 22, 23, 25. How shall I come before Jehovah and bow myself before the exalted Elohim? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? This is what Passover is, right? A year old, a lamb, a kid, right? Will Jehovah be pleased with thousands of rams, with tens of thousands of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my disobedience, the fruit of my body for the disobedience of my soul? He has shown you, this is his response. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does Jehovah require of you, of me, of us, who say we believe? But to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. That's what we were called to do. That's what God desires of us. But how are we going to act justly? How are we to love mercy? And how are we to walk humbly with our God if we want to be legalless? If we want to be less legal? If we don't want to follow Torah? If we don't want to be legalistic? If we don't want to follow instructions? How are you going to walk with God if you don't want to hear what God had to say? Jehovah's voice calls to the city, and wisdom sees your name. Listen to the rod, and he who appointed it. Listen to the rod, and he who appointed the rod is not Satan. It's not the lawless one. The lawless one is not going to appoint a rod because the lawless one wants you to be lawless. So he's not going to appoint a rod. But here in verse 9, Micaiah, the Lord's voice calls to the city, and wisdom sees his name. In other words, people in the city who are wise will see the name of Jehovah, will hear his instruction, and will obey. Listen to the rod, and he who appointed. I'm going to stop there for today. What does Jehovah desire of me? What is Jehovah asking of us? To act justly, verse 8, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. Could you imagine Enoch being disobedient? Disobeying everything God asked him to do? That relationship wouldn't be one that God would just say, hey. The writer wouldn't describe it like the way the writer did. Could you imagine Abraham being disobedient? And I'm not talking about disobedient in spurts or in a certain time, which we all are. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about proposing disobedience, declaring disobedience, commanding disobedience, being disobedient. That's what I'm talking about. Because that's what we've been taught for generations, to be disobedient. Turn your Bibles to Numbers chapter 6. This is part 9 in the series. Is Satan the arch enemy? It's like a question. Is he the arch enemy? Numbers chapter 6, verses 22 through 27 says as follows. And Moses, and Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and to his sons, saying, this is how you shall bless the children of Israel. Again, who is the children of Israel? Go listen to that. You shall tell them, Jehovah bless you and keep you. Jehovah cause his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. Jehovah lift up his countenance toward you and give you peace. So they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Shavua Tov, Shabbat Shalom, happy Passover, happy Feast of Unleavened Bread. Enjoy it, relish in it, read about it, talk to God, talk to Jehovah. Listen, this is what he wants. He wants to have that dynamic relationship. Oh my goodness, I'm telling you. What kind of relationship you would have? I'm speaking to those of you who have children out there. Look at your relationship with a disobedient daughter or son. What kind of relationship you all have? That daughter or son is just disobedient. They don't want to hear you. They don't want to do nothing you say. Examine that kind of relationship, and you be the judge of if that's a good relationship or not. Yeah, you love them. They may even love you. But what kind of relationship do you have with that child? Think about that for a second. Shavua Tov, Shabbat Shalom, happy Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread. Until we meet again, adios, arrivederci, buen nuit, buenas tardes, buenas noches, buenos días. Peace, deuces.